We're going live. Hey, what's up, Facebook world? What's up, Wrestling Nation, Wrestling World, World Wrestling Live? Here we are again for our 1 o'clock, and I've got another amazing Florida coach with us, Coach Cezar Sharbono. Another amazing thing is I just found out his son Chance is the assistant with him out there, so he's come full circle and given back. This gentleman was a two-time Florida State placer. He was also a two-time NCAA D2 qualifier. He has been the coach at Southeast, Palmetto, Sarasota, and now he's at Brandon River the last 3 or 4 years. He is the head coach of Florida Young Guns and Spec Ops Disney Dual Tournament, which is unbelievable. I think we're all sad we missed it. And he's here with us today. Coach, I'm humbled and I'm honored to have you on. I do appreciate everybody that comes on here with me. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Not a problem. Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me.
So talk a little bit about what we've just went through and how it's kind of affected at least your off-season beginning process.
I mean, we had just finished state tournament. I gave the boys the week after state off, which was the week before spring break. So we closed down the room. We weren't going to be in the room for that week, and we were going to take spring break off, and then we were going to come back and start back April, basically beginning of April, or late March, just to start doing 2 days a week off season technique stuff and start the AAU club. And of course, then the world shut down on us. And I started getting peppered immediately by the boys saying, "Hey, can we still go to practice?" No, we can't go to practice. What's going to happen with Megatron? I have no idea. What's going to happen with Disney? I have no idea. What's going to happen with Team Camp? I have no idea. So of all those, they all, of course, got canceled. I think Megatron is trying to come back in some form, and it's just basically a dual meet tournaments form over in Orlando. I guess a couple possibly gyms. We have no idea yet. Waiting for Pfeiffer to figure that one out. And of course, we'll probably get involved just for the fact that we need to get the boys as much time on the mat as possible once we can get back on the mat because of the shutdown. We still have Team Camp that's going to happen. I think the thing that hurt me the most and hurt my situation the most was I've been fighting since I've been at Braden River, even as a volunteer when my son first went there, to try to get them to start club wrestling. I finally got them to give me the high school club and let me do an AAU high school club. And I continue to tell the athletic director that I can only go so far starting kids as freshmen, bringing in sophomores and juniors who have never wrestled and trying to train them. I said, I need to be able to get a feeder program. And Manatee had one. Palmetto has a small one. Lakewood Ranch has a small one, all here in town. But they told me there are different rules required and whatnot. Finally got them to give me clearance 3 days before spring break. I got clearance to start a youth program at Braden River High School. So looking forward to eventually getting back to some semblance of normalcy so I can actually get that youth program up and running. But of course, it happened 3 days before the shutdown. I get clearance. So I started doing a little laying the groundwork. I had probably 12 kids ready to sign up and jump in starting May 1st. So hopefully maybe May turns into August. I have no idea, but hopefully sooner or later we can get back to some semblance of normalcy here in Florida and America in general, so we can get our sport back online. The one thing that concerns me is that the National Federation of High School Sports sent out their little updates or their recommendations, and they recommended wrestling with no contact. So I just said, okay, so basically my team is the state champions and we are the kings of shadow wrestling. So that's cool. I'll let my guys know that they're all undefeated. Works for me.
Yeah, I saw some. Did you see the pictures of some of those clubs that had they put like tape squares 6 feet apart and.
Yeah, but so you can shadow wrestle, but you can't make contact with each other. It makes perfect sense for wrestling.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's no contact in wrestling, is there?
No, not at all. My gear guy reached out to me not that long ago, Ryan Jesse, and was asking me about those face skaters, asking me what I thought about them as like part of a uniform. And I was thinking to myself, going, I mean, it would be kind of cool to have like designer face gaiters. But he's like, for like weigh-ins, when you're in there side by side, you have to wear, they say you have to wear a mask. And I looked at him, I'm like, Ryan, you realize that if we have to wear a mask to weigh in, they're not going to let us touch each other on the wrestling.
Yeah, if it's to that level,
I'm like, so if we're that far gone and we have to have a mask on to stand next to the guy to weigh in, they're definitely not going to let us make contact when it comes time to wrestle.
No, not at all.
He's like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. I'm like, you can still make the designer face gaiters and the custom face gaiters, and I'm sure they'll sell. But I mean, I'm looking for one now. I want a pirate one just so, because I heard from school that if and when we get back to school, I might have to wear a mask to teach in. So
yeah, my wife, her business was closed for like 2 months, and she was going a little stir crazy. So she pulled out the sewing machine and she made a bunch of masks for her girls at work when they opened back up and stuff. And she made us some. So we have them, but I've only been in the car to drive up the road and back. So I haven't really had to mess with them, but apparently people have to wear them to go out.
You're not wearing a mask in the car by yourself, like some people?
Yeah, no, I didn't do that. I don't think my car is infected, so I'm good there, but the other ones, man. So that's good. So, man, you talked a little bit about Braden River and what you guys are doing, and you finally got a permission for a youth club. So you'll get
Correct.
To go to that. Excuse me. And talk about the culture in your program now, especially getting your son on board, and talk about how that's going to help you grow the youth program too, having him with kind of that same mindset and younger energy.
Well, he and I both, I mean, he was a product of the Manatee Youth Program. I coached at the Manatee Youth Program for 7 years. That's where he came up. I came up coaching him over there. And then when the market crashed in 2008, I lost my job in banking, which I was with for 14 years. But I went to school to be a teacher and a coach. So at that point in time, I decided, you know what? I think I want to teach and coach. So I took the huge pay cut, which was actually a pay increase because I had been laid off by just like everybody else in the industry. If you hear any whining or something, my dog has decided to come and sit next to me.
I like it.
and he's begging attention.
I like it. I had the last show towards the end. You could hear the dog starting to bark, like almost like, hey, coach, time to take me out.
He typically doesn't bark unless somebody's at the door, but he's just sitting about 3 feet away from me, whining and pawing at me because I'm talking to you and not him. But so I came up with the youth program at Manatee, coaching there, and my son, of course, being a youth wrestler, he's one of the rarity in Florida. Most kids in high school in Florida don't start wrestling until they get to high school. Youth wrestling hasn't grown as much as it has in, of course, some of these other states. It is growing and has continued to grow in Florida. From when I coached my son when he was 5 and 6 and 7, it's grown by leaps and bounds, and we're way more competitive now than we used to be. We're definitely, I'd say, a top 10 wrestling state for sure. But the culture at Braden River was non-existent in the beginning. I brought my son there. He was going into his junior year. We switched schools because that's what we're districted. And he stepped into a room with a total of, including him, 5 kids in the wrestling team. That was it.
Oh, wow.
5 kids in a wrestling and the coach. In his 2 years there, he had 2 different coaches. His junior year, he had 5 kids on the team. His senior year, he had 7 kids on the team. So my job as dad coach was to pick him up every day after practice and take him elsewhere. And needless to say, I tell you, my dog doesn't bark, and then my dog goes over and starts barking at his treats. Hold on one second. Katerina, get your dog, please.
Before I put him in a half Nelson.
He's barking over there at his treats. So long story short, there was really not a foundation at Braden River of a lot of wrestling. They were more of a football school. They were just didn't really focus a whole lot on wrestling, even though they'd had it for 10 years. They just really never had a super successful program. My son became their first ever state place winner in the school's history. I then took the heavyweight, who was one of my son's friends, who's just finished his sophomore year at 25-15 and didn't win a match at regions, and took him under my wing, and he started going to all the club practices with us as well. And I became his practice partner. Because no one else was big enough. We'd go up to Tampa Prep with the Brawlers with Jake Campbell, and they had no heavyweights in the room. The biggest kid in the room was 180 pounds. So I became practice dummy. And my son's senior year, he and his heavyweight best friend, or he and his heavyweight, both were state finalists. So my son lost at overtime. Brendan, a heavyweight, lost to Cole Schneider, who plays at USF or UCF right now. And then the following year, again, I'm still just a volunteer helping out where I can. The following year, Brendan's senior year, I was the official assistant coach at the school. A friend of mine actually took over as the head coach, and I became the official unpaid assistant coach. I still wasn't getting paid. And Brendan went on to win his state title and won the first state championship in the school history. And again, Brendan, I think on that year we had, I think, 12 kids on the team.
And Brendan is the heavyweight.
Yeah. Yep.
And his son is Chance.
Yep. And then the following year they finally gave me the team, but I was still teaching at Sarasota High. So I was teaching down in Sarasota and then would drive up to Bradenton to coach. So it was kind of hard to recruit, but we did manage to actually build a full program and had a full team for the first time in recent memory, instead of 5 kids on the team. And then finally last year was my first year on campus as a teacher. I had 48 kids start the season on the roster. Yeah. 40. I'm quite the recruiter. I talk to kids constantly. And I got, and the football coaches were buying in. They were recommending kids wrestle as well. So I probably, those 48, at least half of them were football players to start the season. We ended the year, I think, with 22 in the room. And we only graduated 3 seniors. So we've got a large contingent coming back. If we can get back on the map with some semblance of order, I've got about 8 or 9 seniors that could possibly fill out my 14-man roster already this year for my varsity team. So I'm really looking forward to the growth of Braden River Wrestling. This past year was the first time the school had seen multiple state qualifiers since Brendan and Chance. But Brendan and Chance were the outside. They were the kind of the outliers. They're the ones that started the process. We brought 2 to state this past year. The year before we had 0. When Brendan graduated, the next year we had 0 state qualifiers, and it was the first time I did not go to the state tournament in 12 years because I had nobody to coach there. And you didn't even back when I was a youth coach, I'd go and I'd help out with the high schoolers. So I always wanted to be at the state tournament because the high schoolers that I coached with and I wrestled with were there. So being my first time not being there was kind of a big thing. But last year, 2 qualifiers, both will be back. One ended up placing, was the first kid that wasn't one of my kids that I actually coached personally, other than, the high school. This boy started wrestling basically as a freshman. And as a junior, he took 5th in the state at 152 in 2A. And then my 106 was also a state qualifier this past year, and they'll both be back next year. Lots of big goals and big plans for the team next year. We had our most successful year as a team this past year. 24 possible dual meet wins, I think, as a team, something of that nature. And we really stepped up our competition level this past year. We're no longer that rookie team. So I wanted to make sure we got into some really tough tournaments, and we did. We went and got our tails kicked a couple times, but it's what you got to do. I think we wrestled Charlotte in a duel 4 times this past year. So we had Charlotte 4 times. We had Riverdale once. We had Jesuit once. We had mean, you name it. So my kids, I'd go into seating meetings and people would see my kids and be like, "Hey, your kid's got 14 losses." And I'm like, "Yeah, but 6 of those were the number 1 and number 2 guys in the state. So he's still going to be pretty tough."
I was asking, who was I at? One of the Lake Highland prep kids that I saw at one of the tournaments. I was asking him, "Hey, when do the younger kids stop worrying about the records and just wrestle, right?" And they're like, "It takes time," but they're like, the beginning of our season, we'll come back and our records will be like 4-7 or, 4 and.
They're traveling nationally,
traveling
the big tournaments.
But then when we come in, if they look at our record and think they've got a cupcake, they're in trouble, right? But yeah, they're wrestling everybody, so that makes sense. So you kind of went through all my questions. That was pretty good. The last one I'll ask you is, what does opening the rooms look like now? I mean, what do you think the new normal is going to be? I hope it's not shadow wrestling.
God, I hate that. I hate that phrase.
Yeah.
I hate that phrase, the new normal. Social distancing. These are all things I hope to never hear like in a month or two. I never want to hear them again.
Yeah. I apologize.
Oh no, it's just I'm just so frustrated. I really don't know, because with our sport being a contact sport, there is no way to do our sport socially distanced. I mean, like I said,
you have to wrestle.
National Federation of High School Athletics, they recommended football players go to practice and no one touches the same ball. Explain that one. So the center's going to have his ball and he's going to pretend to snap it to the quarterback, who's going to have his ball, and he's going to drop back and he's going to pretend to throw it. And the receiver is going to run down and one hand moss catch it over the defender's back that they can't touch, but he's already going to have the ball with him. I'm not sure how that works.
So you can play football? Is that what it said? You can play football, but you can't touch the same ball?
No. Yeah, that's what they said. They recommended football practices be started with no one touching more than one ball. So everybody's going to have their own ball. So we're going to play shadow football. I mean, like your kids did when they were young and they throw it to themselves and catch it and do the touchdown dance. That's the way it's going to be. So everybody's going to win.
I don't understand that.
Neither do I.
And don't football players wear gloves?
Most of them. But cross contamination. They touch their helmet and they touch their mouthpiece and then they touch the ball. But I just don't see. We're either going to go back to normal in wrestling
and let this thing play out, right?
Because in reality, I mean, I think the numbers are starting to actually show that, youth in general are typically not, in danger with this thing. And I think that the country reacted the way it did because it was just new and they didn't know what was going on. And then now we've got much more information. So we're making some changes and we're opening things back up and we're not seeing the spikes and we're not seeing hospital beds full of people. So I have a feeling that luckily football, they got to get started sooner than we do. I mean, we can do our off-season stuff, but with wrestling, luckily we're not until November before we actually are supposed to get back on the mats for real. So I'm thinking by then, the new norm will be the norm. They will have realized that, guess what? We didn't have a huge outbreak.
I'd like to see how it goes. Believe it or not, I've talked to a few people in wrestling this last month and a half. And as you and I did, we spoke off the air. I get to ask some questions off the air that I don't want to ask on the air, just for whatever reasons. But I kind of want to, there's some camps in June going on, and good for them. God bless them for opening up, and they're going to go do their thing. And I'm not going to be one of them that takes my kids to the June camps. I'm just I want to see a month of wrestling and camps, large group stuff. Like I'll take my son will go back to club and we'll do one-on-one stuff and we'll do whatever you're supposed to do slowly back in the room. But I really want to see how these large camps turnout.
Georgia, just like in their reopening, has already jump started where we're not there yet. Georgia had their first tournament last Saturday.
Really?
So they had their first open youth tournament last Saturday. So I think we can watch Georgia because they're going to be, several weeks ahead of us because we still have not opened up and we're not planning on having any tournaments that I'm aware of until July. So we're still a whole nother month away from that.
Well, I think the end of June, Pride.
Yeah. I recommended, I sent out to my parents group on my Facebook page and told them, I said, this is another camp. I said, this is not the team camp that I want us to go to in July. I said, but I highly recommend if any of you guys want to make up time because you've missed time on the mat, you want to go to Pride.
It's like the first real big sleepaway camp, I think, in the next month. So I want to kind of see what comes out of that and see how the kids do and see how the turnout is and kind of, and I wish them the best. I hope they get thousands of kids. I hope they have a great success. I hope they get a lot of coaches. But I just want to see the other side of that, you know?
Mm-hmm. I think you're going to start seeing, you'll start getting word because last week clubs started opening up, off-campus clubs started opening up. Those off-campus clubs are going to be inundated because school clubs can't open up. So you're going to have, there's a club that we'll be frequenting on Saturday, and it's going to have teams from, anywhere within an hour's drive are going to be, kids are going there. All the serious kids are going to be going there. So it's going to be a very well-attended practice with a lot of people. So,
so I just want to see that stuff, like I want to, as a parent, I want to kind of see what comes out of this. Like, is it really, because you just get totally mind screwed because you watch stuff. Hey, I didn't want to say the other word, but the whole 14-day of not knowing, the whole underlying symptom, all that stuff, you never know. You don't, the 14-day underlying stuff and the not knowing if you have the symptom or not. So I'm sure you and everybody else are going to have a temperature thing and hit the forehead and do the
thing. They're talking about that. They're already saying that at school. We at this point in time, we don't even know what school's going to look like come August. That's still up in the air. You've got everything from online to 50-50 where half the kids are on campus every other day to regular class. And I think that 2 weeks ago, it was still that they were really, really, really leaning towards 50-50. And I think 2 weeks later, here we are now, they're leaning towards regular school because we haven't had the recurrence that people were scared of with us opening up. And in reality, you said you've been in your car and gone down the road. I don't think, I really don't understand the difference between me going to Home Depot and standing in line to get into Home Depot 4 days a week because my wife's honey-do list is 1.5 miles long and she's got me doing this at the house and that at the house and replacing this and replacing that and replace the appliances and put this in and put that in. But I can do all that. But I said the thing today, the cashier at Home Depot can give me my receipt, but they're going to try to say that the principal at the school or the superintendent of schools can't hand a kid a diploma. What's the difference? You got hundreds of people at Home Depot, hundreds of people at Walmart, hundreds of people at Publix.
Yeah, I think it's just more of the backstory. Like I've talked to other wrestling coaches and other people that aren't wrestling, and I've talked to people who believe that this is complete bullshit, right?
Yeah.
But they'll still say that, listen, we still have to, at some sort of conscious effort, be like, okay, all a club needs or all a camp needs or all a college needs is for something drastic to happen to a kid. So we need to make sure that we're taking the precautions just because all we need is one kid to get.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we just need to.
I've seen that. I've seen that one play out. Or I've seen that recommendation or that talk about it. It's only going to take one kid or one parent or one kid to come home and get grandma sick and have grandma die, and then
Right.
everything goes downhill. But I mean, and again, not wrestling related, but the world we live in related. In reality, is that any different than that same kid going to school and catching the flu from his classmate and coming home and getting grandma the flu, and then grandma dies from the flu?
Yeah, or the pneumonia. Yeah, I mean, there's all.
It's
anything. I mean, if you line up, and you don't want to get into this conversation with anyone.
No.
If you line up like a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, a police officer, a fireman, they each will give you, and you say subject is X, you get 5 different.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that's the way it's going to be across the board. But the reality is that the new normal can't be the world shutting down. The new normal can't be taking away all sports from colleges and high schools. I mean, a few weeks ago, I was talking to one of my assistant principals who's a former wrestling coach, and he was truly thinking that they were going to shut everything down and they were going to have no sports this upcoming school year. And my comment was, if they shut down high school sports, then college sports are going to be shut down too.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the world needs to take the Band-Aid off fast.
Yeah.
I think it needs to come off. But the world also needs to understand, like, hey, the Band-Aid's off. That doesn't mean like shirts and pants are off and we're back at like.
No, you need to use you've got to use common sense. You've got to use some. I mean, you got to use precautions, and those that are at the highest risk, they need to continue to be super diligent and keep themselves away. And I mean, if that means little Johnny can't see grandma and grandpa, so be it. I mean, they can Zoom them and FaceTime them. And
I mean, the biggest thing for me that really bothers me is, does that mean I can't go up behind anybody and give them a wet willy anymore?
That might get you knocked out nowadays.
Nowadays, I can't do that. Yeah.
2 weeks into the lockdown, I had a crazy lady at a shopping at Home Depot actually grabbed my arm, and I just kind of looked at her and I'm like, she better be glad I wasn't one of those crazy people that was so anti-germ and free. I mean, she could have got killed just then. She literally grabbed me and touched me and pulled me away. And
listen, people are crazy right now. My wife said that. So she's an optometrist, so she has an optometry practice, and
I just came from getting my eyes done.
Yeah, and so, but there's all these new regulations and requirements. So now the door has to stay locked. The person has to knock. You got to make sure they have a mask on before they come in. Blah, blah, blah. So one of the girls was outside talking to a patient, and somebody called the police, thinking like it was an argument or they were fighting or something. And there was just a conversation. But the mindset these days is like, what the hell's going on over there? So no, it's just the way it is. You ready for the 10 questions?
Yep, shoot.
All right. Bradenton Beach or Sarasota Beach?
We are a Lido family, so we're Sarasota.
Sarasota. I like Sarasota too. Verona's or Jersey Boys or Jersey Brothers?
Verona's.
Outback or Longhorn?
That one's a tough one. We would rather go to Texas Roadhouse.
There we go. Freddy's or Full Belly?
Full Belly. Carolina
beaches or Florida beaches?
Florida beaches. And I went to Carolina. I was in North Carolina.
Yeah. Pembroke or Braden?
Bradenton.
North Carolina barbecue, Florida barbecue?
North Carolina barbecue.
Live goes or clinics?
Live goes.
Florida stone crabs or Florida lobster?
Stone crabs.
Now you were in North Carolina and now Florida. So you prefer the hiking in the mountains or the fishing in the ocean?
I would rather do the mountains, but where I was in North Carolina, there was no mountains. I was in flat tobacco country. So I was about a 45-minute drive to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. but I would say mountains. I'm not a fisherman guy. I'm not a fisherman. I'm a catcher. If I'm on a boat fishing and they're not biting, I'm not fishing. I'm just drinking. So I mean,
I like my kids love to fish and they'll go on boats or whatever they want to do. But I get seasick, so I love the docks. Like we came down, we finally made it down before all this to the big broken bridge over there in St. Pete, Sarasota or whatever. And my kids just loved it because, man, they must have caught 8 or 10 of those. Gosh, I forget what they're like, long and pointy or something. We took them home and ate them. But they were like, it was like, boom, okay. Where we go out to these other piers and you fish all day and you caught nothing.
Yeah, I'm not a fishing guy. I don't go fishing. If I go out with someone, like one of my former wrestlers, actually, he's famous now because he's on that show, Siesta Key. It's him.
Oh, nice.
Alex Kampathakris. He was on my Sarasota high school team. Daddy's 1-800-Ask Gary. But he has a yellowfin boat and a fish finder, and he knows every honey hole out in the Gulf. And I used to have a camp, and I'd bring down Nico Megaludis and Quentin Wright to the camp. It was basically an elite level camp. We'd keep it to 30 kids only, and we took Quentin out deep sea fishing. And that was what I call fishing, because we were catching. There was never a time that a line was in the water that we had 6 lines in the water, but 3 of us had a fish on about every 15 minutes. Someone was catching something. So we had so many grouper and gag grouper and you name it. We went out and caught amberjacks, but it was a week away from season, so we couldn't keep them. But we hit the amberjacks as soon as the line hit the water. They were hitting the thing. I'm like, that's the best fishing I've ever had. We spent 8 hours out there, and we were busy the whole time. Quentin's eyes were this big around when he came back in, all the group. He's like, his biggest thing was he just didn't get to bring any of it home because he got on a plane 2 hours later and had to fly home.
Man, that's good stuff. Hey, so I got to get ready for my next one. I've got
you've got Ken Shirts out today, right?
I do have Ken Shirts out today.
Kenny. Yeah. I coached with because my son, I started bringing him to Kenny's camps, and then Kenny realized, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. Next thing you know, I was on staff with Ken. I was one of Ken's camp counselors here in Florida, and then back up at Pembroke for about 8+ years.
Oh, wow. Yeah, he's coming on at 4. I've got a Andrew Periano coming on next. He's a national wrestling recruiter. He spent 3 years at he spent 4 years at Northwestern, but he qualified 3 times at Northwestern. And he's going to talk a little bit about what the landscape of recruiting is and the national landscape of college wrestling right now, the growth of wrestling in the Southeast. So we'll get some good information there as far as the parents and kids for what to recommend, what to have them do, what to make sure they're prepared for. And that should be fun.
Neither one of my seniors this year, nor my daughter. My daughter was my 3rd senior this year. She started wrestling as a junior. But none of them wanted to go to school for wrestling. So, but of my 8+ rising seniors, I've got a couple that have already said they want to wrestle on the next level. So we're having to start that whole process over that I did with my son and some of my former kids at Sarasota. So.
Cool. Yeah. So I think this will be a good show for obviously that kind of stuff. And like I said, it's going to make, eventually, hopefully I'll have somewhere where people can just go and check out these coaches. And, I've had Division II, Division III, Division I, NAIA.
That's what kids don't understand nowadays. Everybody says they want to be D1. D1 is not for everyone.
No.
And it's not a matter of
5 programs or something.
It's not a matter of D1's better wrestling. I mean, there are D2 guys that can beat D1 guys. I wrestled D2 and I beat D1 guys every year. But there are D2 national champions that can hang with them. I mean, Carlton Hasselrig back in the day won 3 Division II national championships, and that was back when they used to invite the champion from D2 to wrestle on D1. he won 3 D2 national championships and 3 D1 national championships at Pitts Johnstown, and he was in my region in college.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, the best thing I heard was the Shenandoah coach. He's starting a wrestling program there, and he used to coach at Chicago. And he said, I tell parents, please pick a school for kids.
For the school.
Based on the next 40 years, not on the next 4 years. So this is where you're going. If you're coming here to get a wrestling degree, then don't pick it for that. Pick
Exactly.
it for education.
I tell my kids all the time, I'm like, you're going to college to wrestle, to use it. You're using it as an avenue to get your education and get your career. That's what you're using it for. You're not using it because you're going to be the next Olympic champion. Those are few and far between. I mean, wrestling, everyone is not Ken Chertow. Ken turned wrestling into his livelihood. I mean,
yeah, look at Colin Palmer.
Yeah.
Guys like that, Mike Krause.
Yeah. Jordan Burroughs is going to turn wrestling into his livelihood. I mean, he makes a living off of it. Right. Those guys can do that. I said, but those guys are few and far between. It's like making the NFL and making the Pro Bowl. I mean,
yeah, that's like I asked Spencer Lee, what are your goals financially after college? And he said, I'll just keep wrestling.
And as good as he is, he can continue to make a living from it until I mean, and reality is once his competition days are done, he's going to get paid big money to be a coach just because of his name and who he is and his success.
And he doesn't suck, right?
No, he doesn't suck at all.
Not even. You take it easy. Thanks for your support.
Real quick, Spencer Lee. Super 32, my son's first year at Super 32. We're sitting front row, we're betting a quarter a piece on who you got. And Spencer Lee goes into the finals, and I'm like, and we didn't know who Spencer Lee was at the time, really. I mean, I'm like, I'll take the Spencer Lee guy, and Chance took the other kid, and Spencer took him down and hit him in a 2-on-1 tilt and pinned him in 16 seconds. 2-on-1 tilt in the finals of the Super 32. And I looked at Chance. I'm like, that kid's special.
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking to Coach Palazzo, and we were talking about something, and I said, we were talking about the different levels of tournaments. I was asking him just because I'm trying to learn, and I called him, asked him, and I said I couldn't believe like Bousakis 2 years ago. He walks out, the kid's 55-1, and he pins him in a minute. Like, I'm like, the kid's 55-1. Like, it's not like he wasn't
a chump.
Some of these different level athletes are. That's
what I felt sorry for the other kid. I mean, you made the finals of Super 32. That's something you want to brag about. It's like the biggest preseason tournament. I mean, 160-man bracket, and you can't even tell your friends.
No, you know what he's bragging about now, right?
Yeah, well, he pinned me in. Well,
I got beat by.
But you can't even brag and say, hey, you got to go watch this video of me wrestling Spencer Lee. Oh, dang, man, you got pinned in a 2-on-1 tilt in 16 seconds.
No, but you can get them. You'll be like, hey, look, don't worry. I got it right here on my phone. It's real quick.
Just show them you guys shaking hands in the finals.
Yeah.
Don't show them the actual match because you got pinned like a JV kid.
Oh, man. That's
a 3-time state champion.
And to think the Santos beat him.
Yeah, I know.
Crazy.
All right, brother. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I'm very thankful for you coming on. Have a great day.
Talk to you later.